morning and welcome to the Link Up. It's certainly nice to have you join us today. We've been off for a little bit, couple of bank holidays, and also we had sports, knapsack. That was certainly fun. Good to see the little kids back out again. Decided to, change the look a little bit this morning, and so I'm enjoying this, and I certainly hope that you are too. A nice, beautiful feeling of freshness and outside and air. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, actually, at the beginning of the chat, because went to the beach as usual. As you all know, that's now being part of my self-care, and had an opportunity to chat with a fellow swimmer, and she said that she watches the Link Up religiously every Thursday. So thank you so much for watching. And I asked her if there was anything that she wanted us to touch on when, next we did the show. I said, well, it would be in May. And she said, yes, panic attacks. And it was interesting because we've been talking about, finding your happy. That was one of our themes for the Link Up. That was one of them when we had Dr. Mears on, and that was an interesting chat, and perhaps we should have her back to take a look at that. But panic attacks to the point where, not that you feel anxious or there's anxiety or anything like that, no. We're talking about panic attacks that actually make you feel like if you're having a heart attack, but then when you actually go to the hospital and have all of the tests done and so on, it's not a heart attack that you're having, it's a panic attack. And these last couple of years have certainly been reason for anyone to panic, and she is in the teaching profession, so we can understand it's almost like triple the amount of concern that she would have, and the amount of stress that they're all under. So we get an opportunity today, I said that to say this, that we get an opportunity today to chat with Mrs. TESSA CHADERTON-SHAW. And Tessa is a mental health advocate. She was the former head of the NCSA. Actually, she is a lecturer in substance abuse, and so we will be chatting with her a little later on. She is on her way, so we're looking forward to that. That will be part of the beginning of our discussion on mental health. And then remember that we are in the season of emancipation, and as a matter of fact, what we're going to do is we will actually have them on twice in the month, every other week, so that we can keep you up to date with what's happening with the season, the idea behind it, and what other people are doing within their own realms of activity. Maybe not having a season, and I'm talking about, we are the Link Up, so our outside links. How do they celebrate them, or us? So we get an opportunity to chat with Nana Asante, who is a community activist, and she's secretary of the IDPAD coalition in the UK and secretary of the UK chapter of the Global African Congress. And it's going to be an interesting discussion with her, because as a community activist and important person within the community, what exactly led her to that, and how, are they looking after them? And when I say that, because I don't want to give the wrong information, but IDPAD, I think, deals with the International Decade for Persons of African Descent. I haven't found it, but I think that's what it is. Yes, IDPAD. So that should be interesting, and also the work of the Global African Congress in the United Kingdom. And then joining us will be Senator John King, who is Special Advisor, Cultural Heritage in the Prime Minister's Office, and with him will be Rodney Grant, who's Program Advisor in the Office of Reparations and Economic Enfranchisement in the Prime Minister's Office. So we're going to be talking season of emancipation, culture, and how it all affects us, all in one, right here on the Link Up. So stay with us as usual. It's going to be a highly informative session. So remember, you can participate. I know you usually like to participate after by sending me notes and things that I should mention next time. But you can still call, you can. And you can share your comments on Facebook and watch in real time on at CBC Barbados. So, coming up next after the break, managing stress. Yeah, let's talk about that when we come back. I did promise that, I'd just share some information first before we get into any chats on managing stress. And you hear so much about stress these days. People say that they're stressed, that they're under a lot of stress. What exactly is this stress? And I didn't want to just, give you any little superficial information. I wanted to go straight to the source. And one of the sources that I like to go to in terms of when it comes to mental health is the National Institute of Mental Health. It says that basically stress is your body's response to any demand. So, any demand on your system, your body, both positive and negative, creates a response within your body. We've heard about the fight or flight response that your body has, which is a natural response. And that is its response to any kind of dangerous situation, because stress triggers it, that fight or flight response. And how do you know this? Well, if you're afraid of dogs and all of a sudden you're walking up a road and you notice that perhaps your neighbor's gate is open and you know that that neighbor has a really huge dog, a dog that's not very friendly, immediately, you might not see the dog, you might hear the dog barking, but the dog hasn't even come out of the house as yet. But you see the gate is open and you hear the dog and you've had a bad experience in the past before with dogs, what happens? Faster breathing. You start to feel an increased heart rate. Your muscles tense. You are getting ready, or your body is getting ready to get you out of there, to get you out of harm's way. And it's this particular type of stress that helps you to make that almost necessary split-second decision to either get out of there quickly or take your stance to fight that dog. And this is protecting you from danger. It's a natural body response, but it's not something that lasts forever. This is within the situation. However, there are stresses which can cause you to almost have, lead to things like hypertension, stress of a job, dietary things as well. Stress can cause those things as well. It can cause you to eat. That's your reaction to stress. But there's stress that is constant over time, constant over a period of time, that can be detrimental to your health. So stress prevention and management are important so that you can, kind of like jiggle and juggle those things in your life which are critical. And chronic stress, this is the stress when you talk about constant stress, is one which can weaken your immune system, interfere with the proper functioning of your body's systems. A lowered immune system, of course, means that you're more prone to colds, to infections, and over time, this strain can lead to things like heart disease and high blood pressure and diabetes, depression, anxiety, panic attacks. So, what do? Perhaps you can identify the things that stress you out. That's a good thing, because there's no hard and fast rule. Everybody responds to stress differently. So, what stresses you out? Well, that can be easier said than done, because, relationship, work, poor work environment, health, finance, things like that. Finding the cause, the root of that stress and anxiety can be really challenging. So, have a chat with your doctor if you're beginning to feel like you're really stressed out, because constant stress, as we said, can cause you to, lead to other more serious medical problems. And we certainly don't want that. And we're going to get an opportunity to find out how you can manage it, how you can find your happy. That was one of the themes that we had before, remember? Self-care, looking after you, taking moments out for you. It's not being selfish. We all hear of the example that people use of the airplanes when the airplane is in danger and that oxygen mask comes down, how that oxygen mask can actually, save lives, but you have to take yours and put it on your face first before you deal with anybody else. And that's the rule. Self-care, not being selfish. You're taking time out for you so that then you'll be able to take time out for others. So we're going to get an opportunity to talk with a mental health advocate today, and we're going to take a look at that. And there's so many illnesses now with mental unwellness. And the difficulty of that is you deal with many things: stigma, side effects from really strong medication. How do you do that? And how do you recognize the signs? We'll find out all of that a little later on, but time for us to take a quick break. And more to come right here on the Link Up. Remember, sit with a paper and pen, take some notes. Believe you me, I've had a couple of people who've told me that they actually do that. So glad to know that you do. Enjoy sharing the information. We'll be back in a bit. The theme today is making connections, and one of the connections that we are making today is in the UK with Nana Asante. And Nana is an interesting individual. Her life is packed with service. She's a passionate community activist. She's the secretary of IDPAD, that coalition in the United Kingdom. She was elected secretary of the UK chapter of Global African Congress this year in February. She has monthly meetings, poetry, spoken word. She has a space for activists to improve their use of words and learn from poets. And even more than that, she speaks, I think it's something like 3 languages. She also speaks Ga, the language of the Accra region of Ghana. She currently chairs Africans for Jeremy Corbyn Values and is a trustee of Colombo, UK. I am thoroughly excited to chat with you, Nana. As I told you, I want to find out where it all began, how you got started, and how the move from Africa to the UK. Tell us all about it. Welcome to the Link Up.
Well, thank you so very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be with you. In a sense, how did I start? Well, parents, background, my dad was in the diplomas. In fact, he worked with Nkrumah, Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana. So it was through that. So I was actually born in Israel because he was posted there. And it was from Israel that we went back to Ghana. And then after the coup in Ghana, unfortunately, Nkrumah was removed. He was posted to Switzerland. And it's in Switzerland that I learned French. And I think the life of service started with both parents. Both my parents were very much about, you are here on earth. You've got to use the talent God has given you to serve and to do something, make the difference. Yeah, so that's sort of in a gist how I got into that.
So, but making a difference, how do you choose? How do you decide which area? Because, it's so many things need help. How did you zero in on that particular type of service, the type that you do?
I think sometimes it's serendipity because originally I was very much I still am very interested in business. So when I got married and I was in Ghana, and while I was at university, I started a business. Unfortunately, it was a very turbulent political time. And so we had to leave Ghana. And we ended up in the UK because my husband was born in the UK. So didn't need a visa to come, or or even though I did because I carry a Ghanaian passport, it wasn't as difficult because it was British national. Got to the UK, and it was there that I sort of pushed into the political field because you find the injustice that is so glaring, you cannot help but do something about it. So I got into the political arena really in the UK because you find that something that we don't talk about, the racism is even with all they're very good at how would I say, putting that polite veneer on things. But you find that the injustice is there. And so one has to do something. You can't just sit back and allow it to continue. So that's how, in the UK, that's how I got into that activism. And in terms of how you have to be about certain things. For me, my Christian faith drives my activism. It's because, one verse that always resonates with me is Micah says, what does the Lord require of you? And he requires that you pursue justice. And, and so it's that drives what I do. Conflict with God, but to change the status quo.
When you speak of getting into the political arena, sometimes you think of the separation of church and state, and here you're saying that your faith, was part of your drive to serve,
Yeah.
which is
Absolutely.
which is. So it was there that you found that you could make the most difference. You speak of racism, and over the course of this show, we have had the opportunity to discuss like the Windrush generation, which of course, the Caribbean people who made their living there, and they have shared with us some truly horrible experiences. But it's what they have done with those experiences that, I usually like to celebrate, that they rose above it,
Absolutely.
But here you are within the political arena, and I think you became the mayor of Harrow.
I was.
Yes, you were. And we're talking a different generation now. We're talking young people, who are now, they're born there. So their whole outlook and attitude is different. How do you deal with that? How do you communicate with them and they communicate with you? Because your experiences might be different even though they themselves are experiencing under the same umbrella racism. Yeah. So
I think for me it's reminding young people that, I'm sorry, your face is your passport. Even my children, you might be carrying British passport, but your face is your passport. And I think that lesson is hard for them to hear. Again, you talk about the Windrush and Commonwealth generation, what happened to them. For a lot of them, they were in denial. Yes, you go through, indignities, and sometimes you excuse it. And I know that sometimes people behave badly, so you chalk it to that it's because they did X that happened to them. But the bottom line is, there is a regime, we seem to forget, and I know we're in the season of emancipation in Barbados, people forget that the whole enterprise of trafficking Africans to the New World and, enslavement was born with racism as a cover. that we weren't quite equal, we weren't quite human beings, we were three-fifths of a human being, so they were justified in doing what they were doing. So in a sense, we need to remember our history. Yes, you might be born in the UK. I don't have a British accent. A lot of the young people, my children, do. So even on the phone, they don't know who you are. And, you know, it's little things. But we need to also remember our history. If we forget our history, we are doomed to repeat the problems that others face. So I often tell people, well, you might say I wear, because sometimes my children actually say, oh, Mom, you wear a chip on your shoulder. I said, no, I'm realistic. I'm realistic about what we're facing. That with all that veneer of civilization, this, if you look at the European nations, some of what they did is atrocious. It was a crime against humanity. And sometimes we need to learn from the Jewish people, because they have learned to tell the world that, look, what you did to us was something we need not forget. We must always remember. And we need to do the same thing. I think we're too quick sometimes to want to brush it under the carpet, because they urge us to do that. But we need to remember and remind them that actually reparations has not been paid. And until that is done, there hasn't been a proper acknowledgement of all that was done that was wrong. Yes, we can pull ourselves up our bootstraps, we can do extraordinary things, and people are doing extraordinary things. But we need not forget that we are owed as a people. And in a sense, that's why I like the name Global African Congress. It's as a people, Global Africa is owed not only an apology, but reparations.
You are Secretary of the UK chapter of IDPAD, the International Decade for People of African Descent Coalition. I find that whole idea, and the decade is soon going to be up, isn't it? How many people knew that, 2014 to 2024 was going to be this decade of us? And they had such wonderful objectives. I went looking because that's what I like to do, promote respect, protection, fulfillment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by people of African descent, promote a greater knowledge of and respect for the diverse. It sounded so good, but here we are in 2022. What have we accomplished?
You're right, but I think we need to remember, in that sense, the United Nations takes a long-term view. What people forget is that before we had the decade, we had the year.
Yeah.
And we had the year, I think, was 12. And most people never heard of it. But because we take a long view, if you're an activist in that field, you know that it's a long time coming, even before we got the year. It was Durban 2001 that there was the UN conference against racism and all forms of intolerance, etc.
Yes.
That is when, for the very first time, and people have been agitating for some time, that it was recognized or it was acknowledged that enslavement, and I like that, I prefer not to use slavery, but to use enslavement, because somebody did it. And the trafficking of Africans, it wasn't a trade. Trade is legal, trafficking is illegal. We need to do that in our language. Sort of make sure that people hear it.
Interesting,
It was the
you're
first
right.
time that was declared a crime against humanity. Unfortunately, 9/11 intervened, so there was a pause in the activism. However, in 2012 we got the year. In 2015 we got the decade. And what has happened is that activists have not been quiet. What they've done is we now have a permanent forum for people of African descent, which will take on as soon as the decade is over. Because what people don't know is that countries like the UK refuse to acknowledge the decade. The program of action, they refuse to do anything about it. We have tackled the UK government once or twice, asked the question, and they said Her Majesty's government has no plans to mark the decade. And they like to pat themselves on the back that they're doing a lot already. But we know that it's insufficient. Because when you look at what happened to the Windrush and Commonwealth generation, it's a continuation of the kind of indignity that they foist on our people. What people forget is that that scandal took place because they changed the Immigration Act in 2014. This government has changed it again. What people don't realize, and again, going back to young people who carry British passports, what they forget is they've now put in law that they can strip you of your citizenship. And they can do that without informing you. So what it is that the problem remains, and the campaigning we need to be awake to the fact that we live in a very unfair world. And until we get the European government to acknowledge what they did, 500 years, and they followed that with colonialism, it is something that needs accountability. We need that restorative justice, which reparations is about.
Annoys me is that the people who are in the seat of power, and I'm not talking of the ones who are actually in the governments, but the ones who are, the ones behind who drive everything, are those who have had the opportunity of those centuries of finance and money from that whole enslavement period, so that generational wealth which they still live on today was on the backs of our ancestors. So I don't know how much accountability, because they're not going to acknowledge it, because it means that they perceive that they might have to give up some part of their history, so they rewrite it to suit themselves.
But then that is why we have a duty to actually tell history. And that's why I was heartened to know that you have a season of emancipation. Because, there's an African proverb that unless the lion learns to tell the tale, the story of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. So we owe it to ourselves to tell that story. And it is not, in a sense, when we talk about justice, it is not debatable. Reparations must be paid. And it is an acknowledgement that they got their wealth off our backs. It was unfair. And there needs to be restitution. And again, my faith is very powerful for me. If you remember, when the tax collector was called by Jesus and he acknowledged the wrong he had done, he paid back 3 times what he took, or 4 times, whatever it is that the Bible actually says. So there's precedent. And we all know that they took the money, they have invested it, even if they pay reparations, they're not going to be poor. But what will happen is that they will restore, global Africa to the position that it needs to be. But of course, what is also important for all of us to acknowledge is that we need to do self-repair. We need to acknowledge who we are. We need to be proud of ourselves as a people. Because I think everywhere, every time, we see Africans, and I call all of us Africans, we see us striving to do great things. Your Prime Minister is actually giving us a lot of hope, a lot of pride. She strides the world stage, and she speaks, and all of Africa is proud. When she was in Glasgow in November, and she spoke about climate change, powerful. And it's that sort of thing that we need to, and she is not shy that actually reparations must be paid. It's not, we do acknowledge that we also need to do some work ourselves, but that doesn't let them off the hook. And we need to be supporting powerful people like Prime Minister Mia Mottley. Honestly, she is somebody that we are so proud of. She makes our hearts sing. When you look on WhatsApp and people are sharing her videos, etc., we know that, yes, we need leaders like this to give us that drive and that place that we all need, and our children need, and our children's children.
Yeah. For me, the pride in RPM is not necessarily that she says the things, but the fact that she believes in them.
She believes it.
She believes, she feels it. Yeah.
You
We're
can
going to,
tell that the integrity is there.
yes, we're going to take a quick break, Nana. And what I want to take a look at when we come back is how do we then do what you say we need to do? What are the ways that we can go about changing the way we see ourselves, how we see things, how we change the way that we think about ourselves? Because I think that that is also part of the problem, and we're going to find out just what you think when we come back. You're watching The Link Up. Today we're making connections, and this is one connection that I'm so happy to make with Nana Asante. And Nana is a community activist, secretary of IDPAD Coalition UK, and also the UK chapter of the Global African Congress, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I wanted to find out, because there are some changes that we ourselves have to make as a people, so that we can see the positive changes happen to us as a people. So I want to know, what do you see and what are your thoughts on this? How do we go about making that change?
I think one of the first things is we need to learn our history. We need to reconnect with the stories of our past, both family histories. You know, we find stories of resistance throughout families. I mean, when I look at the Ga people that I come from, there's a little town near the capital called La. And it's funny, the British called it Labadi because they said the people are bad. But now we're reclaiming our name. The place is La, it's not Labadi. And the reason they called it bad was every time they built a fort, in the night, our people would destroy it. So they had to go further down the coast in another town to build it. And you know, those forts were where they kept our people before they shipped them overseas. And so that story of resistance, we need to claim it and tell it. So to me, those are the small stories. But then there are the bigger stories, the way Haiti fought three empires, three European empires, and prevailed. We need to know those stories, because invariably we grew up with stories from the point of view of the colonial oppressors. I myself, because I went to a French school, I learned French history. And you learn how they tell their story, how wonderful they are. We need to tell our stories about how wonderful we are, about the things we've done. There'll be challenges and things that are disappointments, but those stories need to be told from our own perspective. Once we do that, we're changing our mindset and our psyche. We should also recognize the things we've done in terms of inventions. The very fact that Greek civilization came from Africa. Even the Greeks say that they took their knowledge from the African continent. But growing up as I did in Europe, I never. It is only lately in life when you're learning and you're reading and you find out that, oh, They never told us that. They always talk about the Greek democracy, Greek this, Greek that. What about the fact, I mean, we talk about the Hippocratic Oath. Imhotep was physician, he was a polymath, he was an architect, he was this knowledgeable person and the real father of medicine. And so we need to learn the stories and put things right. That is the first thing. So it's education, it's knowing our history. And then we need to engage with what is happening today. So, for example, if you look at Global African Congress, we are hosting, with the help of the Barbadian government, we are hosting a conference, an international conference on reparations in August in Bridgetown. And that conference is about finding out where we are at and where we need to go. And so from the 4th to the 6th of August, we hope the world, Global Africa and allies will descend on Bridgetown. And we will do what needs to be done. We need to take stock of what has happened and then chart a way forward. So those are things that we need to do. And that is very empowering when we take agency and we decide what we need to do as a people.
About what you said is, okay, reading and finding out about our own history. Now, we all know that a lot of our history has been rewritten to suit the colonial master rather than the enslaved. However, we also have to change the way that we look at each other, the way that we accept each other. Well, I think they have a term for it now called, what is colorizing or color, something where we, you know, I'm lighter than the next person and the person who's really dark. I'm trying to, is color something. Anyway.
Yeah, color.
That, yes, exactly. So all of that is part of what keeps us down. And they also like to throw in your face that, you know, during the enslavement, that there were Africans who actually sold other Africans into enslavement. I don't think that has anything to do with being African. I think it's human beings tend to do that. It's called power. It's called power.
No, you're 100% right. But you know what? The interesting things I learned when I was mayor, I was invited to a synagogue. And one guest that they had was the widow of an activist, a Jewish activist, who never forgave the Jews of Hungary, the leadership, because he managed to escape from a concentration camp. Got there, he went over, I don't know how many countries, got back and told them this is what is happening. Fight when they put you on the trains. And these people betrayed him. What they did, rather than pass on the message, they were more interested in getting their families to Israel. So they sat on the information which he had brought at great cost. And the reason I tell this story is that often when we hear the story of the Holocaust, we do not hear about Jews who betrayed other Jews. And like you said, it is the story of human nature. Once there is trafficking to be done and money to be made, there will always be traitors. But we never hear about the traitors among Jewish people. But we like to, and again, this is partly what the divide and rule of the enslavers. They always like to point out that there were collaborators. There are always collaborators. Let us not lose sight of those who fought the fight. We need to learn the story of ASANTE, who fought the British. But even as she fought them and defeated them until they prevailed and took her to Seychelles in exile, they brought over Hausa troops from Nigeria. So are we going to start hating the Nigerians because they worked for the British and they fought? You know, so understand, if there is a power, people will try and earn a living and they will do things that maybe you and I might not do. Until we are put in a position where you have to make decisions about whether you compromise with the power that be or you fight the fight, we need to actually focus on what is real. At the end of the day, they came with their ships and caused havoc on global Africa. You have even Inga, who fought them for years, and that was the Portuguese. Got stories of resistance. Why do we focus on the collaborators? And it goes back to what I said about that proverb. We need to tell the tale.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. I agree, and I'm glad that you're saying that, because again, going back to you using different words for words that we've heard about, like, you know, you say trafficking instead of trade, enslavement instead of slavery. I noticed within the IDPAD mission statement, there was, hang on, let me just double check so that I don't gloss over it. Right here in the recognition part, it says the formal acknowledgement of African as the terminology for ethnically black people of African heritage. You want to chat about that?
Yes, I think again they have managed to divide us in that some say I'm from the Caribbean, even on the British Isles, or I'm British, forgetting that yes, you might be British, your passport, but you are ethnically African. Black, in fact, there's no Blackistan. There's no nation called Black. So when changing who we are as a people is the beginning of self-repair. So that when I see a brother or a sister from the Caribbean, they are Africans. Yes, we got different histories, different, and that is also good. We got different foods, but we got things that connect us. And recognizing how we're linked up gives us that strength as Africans. If you look at the Chinese, no matter where they are, they're still Chinese. Some of them would never have stepped foot in China, but they are Chinese. We need to remember that we are African. Part of what the reason why I reject the term African is that is being, you know, often I remember growing up, what you see on television is you see starvation, poverty, etc. That's the image of Africa they like to portray. We need to, it is being impoverished because people are there taking what they should not and not paying a fair price for it. So it's about all of that we need to care about what happens to Africans wherever they come from. If you look at the war between Russia and Ukraine, whatever people will say, the way they treated African students was appalling. You know, pulling them off trains. When you said women and children, African women were pulled off trains. And for me, whether the African woman came from Lucia, Barbados, Canada, or came or from UK, Nigeria, Cameroon, wherever, they are African. And that was what was happening to them. It didn't matter what passport they had. It was their face that was old. So we need to recognize how we are one people without separate identities, because histories are rich and we need to celebrate our histories. But we are African. And until we start, you know, celebrating our Africanness, we have a problem.
Yeah. How do, well, I think, let me rephrase it. How does the Global African Congress, how does that get teeth that they can stand up and unite and as a global entity and fight for just what you're talking about?
I think one of the things that, I mean, Global has been going for 20 years. We're born now in 2002, so we're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. We've had challenges, we've had setbacks, but we've also had moments of celebration. One of the things that Global African Congress started is that we are all African. We spell Africa with a K, partly to debate between the Asians and Europeans who are on African soil and who also call themselves African. We are saying that Africans, whether they're in the Caribbean, the Americas, Europe, are Africans. The African with a K is people of African heritage. And we've tried to find ways in which we can connect. We're trying to build a grassroots movement. And it's hard going because, again, we have to re educate ourselves. We have to get through challenges of ego and all sorts of things. But it is a fight worth fighting. So we have to have that re-education of ourselves, the self-repair, but we also have to deal with the governments of the world, the people who run our world, and challenge the way in which they run the world. And together we can do it. And you know, Alice Walker said the most common way people give up power is by thinking they don't have any. I believe in our agency. Our unity is our strength. When we come together to reason and do things together, we are powerful beyond measure. And I think that's what we need to take from the last 20 years and the years going forward.
Nana, I'm going to ask you, I know that I've had you on for like an hour, and as I told you, we could talk for hours. I know that we could. I'm just asking you if you could stay on with us a little bit. I know you're having a bit of a challenge with your internet connection, but I've got Senator John King.
I know, and I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Yes, we've got Senator King who's going to join the conversation next. So I would love you to be able to hold on for a bit. Thank you so much. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back. You're watching The Link Up today on CBC TV 8 as we take a look at our season of emancipation. But, you know, making the connection and linking up with Nana Asante, community activist and secretary of IDPAD coalition in the UK, and also the UK chapter of the Global African Congress. And it is our season of emancipation, so it is really great to have Senator John King join us. Senator King is the Special Advisor on Cultural Heritage with the Prime Minister's Office. And a little later we'll be joined by Rodney Grant, who is the Program Advisor of the Office of Reparations and Economic Enfranchisement in the Prime Minister's Office. And I would love to hear him and Nana have the conversation. But I say good morning to you, Senator King. And I'd like to introduce you, if you haven't met her as yet, to Nana Asante of the IDPAD in the UK. Did you get an opportunity to hear part of Nana's contribution? It's been thoroughly educational.
I actually caught the last about 5 minutes before I came in. I was actually at Golden Square trying to get something sorted out for Saturday,
Okay.
but I rushed back to the office so I could get into the interview. But it's fascinating,
It
and as you
is.
know me well, you know I love these kind of conversations.
Exactly. And I would like, please, don't wait for me to invite you into the chat. You can ask each other questions if you so desire. But we've been
Fair
learning
enough.
so much this morning. Nana has, in terms of, and I know you would like this, in terms of the way that we speak, the words we use. So she prefers
Yes,
things like trafficking instead of trade, enslavement instead of slavery, and
correct.
correct. And it really does open up your eyes to the way that, what was it Bob Marley said, emancipate yourself from mental slavery?
First great words of Marcus Garvey,
Yes,
and I'll tell you this,
Absolutely.
Peter.
yes,
There's also the importance of identification. And when you guys were speaking about African, you would notice that anywhere else in the world, people of varying descents or ethnicities will still be referred to as someone from China, even if they're here in Barbados or if they're in London or wherever they are. People still refer to them as Chinese. Same thing for persons of East Indian descent, they still see them as Indians. But when it comes to people of African descent,
Yes.
they have tried so hard, as you mentioned earlier, to divide us. And so you put us into categories. So this is a Jamaican, and this is even in the Caribbean, rather than Caribbean people as a group, you have this is a Jamaican, and this is a Caucasian, and this is a whatever. These are all tactics that have been used over many, many centuries to keep people divided. And it's important that at this juncture that we begin to recognize these things and change the language, so to speak.
but truthfully, don't we do it to ourselves as well? You
But
know,
that's the point.
I am
That's the point.
Barbadian, so I am better than. I am Trinidadian, so I am wealthier than. We do it to ourselves as well.
But you have to remember that these are behaviors that were purposely
And
taught.
having said that,
You're not going to get out of it. You're not going to get out of it overnight. They've been taught over centuries. And so therefore, the deprogramming and reprogramming of our people is necessary. Hence, you have a season of emancipation. You have the discussions that are going on now on reparations. I mean, you have people who look like us who are dead set against the whole idea of reparations also. So there is a lot of work, that mental slavery that was referred to, that we have to work on.
Talk to us about the season of emancipation, because I think that many people might only see it as a series of events and not understand the linkages that are taking place throughout that thread that is, making it a cohesive unit as opposed to just a series of events.
Okay, so the season of emancipation, it runs from April until August, the end of August. Within there are a number of events. You're going to have things like lectures on various things pertaining to the transatlantic slavery, our own development. There are also events that are entertaining. But the main purpose of all of this is to begin that very process that I just mentioned of deprogramming and reprogramming our people. The first thing that people must begin to understand is that they don't have worth. And so that when people begin to talk about emancipation, oftentimes it gets clouded with, okay, so there were these abolitionists and these people did this and these people, we should be thankful to Wilberforce and this person and the next. But no one really talks about the rebellion and the revolts and the fight back that our people they fought for centuries. you place it in a context that makes it seem as if we were weak and we just took it and everybody came in and did what they wanted to us and that was the end of it. So that's because the stories have been told from a Eurocentric point of view. Now that we have our own historians, our own literary people, our own academics, our own scholars, and whatever, and our own research, we are beginning to come up with information that is vital in being able to back that inferiority complex, which is inherent in all of us, like it or not, it is there. But it also is feeding new information that people individually and collectively begin to have a better sense of who they are and who they want to be to the rest of the world going forward. And I think the season of emancipation, you heard the Prime Minister talk many times about creating a new national consciousness.
Yeah.
And this new national consciousness is based on getting people of African descent to understand that we are not better than anyone else, but we are not worse than anyone else. We are equal, and the capacities that other people have in things like science, technology, whatever else, we have that same capacity. And we just have to have the confidence in ourselves to understand that with our own dignity and regardless of all the things that happen to us in various parts of the world, that we can stand with anyone, doesn't matter who they are, as an equal, as a human being. Remember, if my memory serves me right, I could be wrong, but in all of history, the only persons who I know of who have been studied by so-called scientists and denounced as being fully human are us. Mm-hmm. And it's on record. And we ourselves have been taught these Darwin theories and all of these other things. And if you actually believe these things, then you act in the way that others say that you're supposed to act. And it really is a major problem that we face. And it doesn't matter the level of your education, the level of your wealth, none of these things. Because a lot of these things are passed on, and sometimes people act them out without even knowing it. So the job of the season of the season of emancipation is one step in us being able to break those mental bonds that we have by putting on events and lectures and different things to re-educate and reignite our people.
I think while you were speaking, Nana was trying to get in, but she has a slight delay, so it's creating a little bit of a problem for her. But Nana, you wanted to say something, and I think that Mr. Grant as well has joined us. So we say good morning to Rodney Grant, and Rodney is the program advisor. Yes, go ahead, Nana. Sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to. Yes, I wanted to thank Senator King for what he said about, the reprogramming. I think when we hear the stories of Wilberforce, often when they're telling that story, they forget to talk about the sons of Africa. These are African abolitionists who actually were active and did so much to free us. Take away our agency, as if we were sitting there and they free. So the rebellions are really powerful. Whether it's Busa, whether it's Etur, whoever it is, we did. And we need the stories to our children. We need that consciousness that we were not the people to things happen, but we took action. Celebrate that because we are more powerful than we realize.
Exactly.
To the link up, it's nice to have you join us this morning. And Rodney Grant is the program advisor, the Office of Reparations and Economic Enfranchisement in the Prime Minister's office. Rodney, nice to have you with us.
Hey, good morning, and pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we're having a little issue with our connection this morning, I think, but hopefully we will be able to continue the discussion. Did you get an opportunity to hear any of the discussion at all?
Well, I think I came in on the point where John was making such a passionate statement. I came in just on the end of that. But I wasn't sure of the context of the discussion, really.
the context of what he was discussing came out of what I was asking, or a comment that I made, where I said that unfortunately some members of the public only see the season of emancipation as a series of events. They don't recognize that there is a through theme or a thread, which is under the whole umbrella of identity and changing the way that we see ourselves and hence others see us, and getting to know us as a people. And the conversation that I had before with Nana brought up all of the things about recognition of ourselves, promoting knowledge of ourselves. She considers one of the most important things we need to do is to teach our own history and to find out about our own history, and don't go with the revisionist one that they have, which even has, in terms of Christianity, Jesus of a different complexion.
Interesting.
Sorry, that's just me getting my own, I'm going to take a quick break. If you don't mind, Rodney, my director is saying, let me just take a quick break. Let's see if we could just make a slight adjustment with the connection. But that's just me. And y'all know, I say what I think, and I also say what I feel. So anyway, we'll be back in a little bit. You're watching The Link Up. Today we are taking a look at the season of emancipation. With us we have Nana Asante. Nana is a community activist and secretary of IDPAD, and you would have heard me say IDPAD, and in the beginning I did say that it stands for the International Decade for People of African Descent, their coalition in the United Kingdom. She's secretary of that, and we also dealt with that because I don't think that people even realize that there was a decade that was going on for that. So that in itself was a discussion that Nana and I had. However, she did say that they had made some strides within that decade. So that is good to know, but more, of course, needs to be done. She's also secretary of the UK chapter of the Global African Congress. And remember, that is African spelt with a K. And one of the questions that we did have coming through in the program was to find out why was African spelt with a K. And she explained because it's Africans of all descent, not just on the motherland itself. So we also have Senator John King joining us today, Special Advisor in Cultural Heritage with the Prime Minister's Office, and also Rodney Grant, Program Advisor in the Office of Reparations and Economic Enfranchisement in the Prime Minister's Office. And Rodney, before we took the break, I interrupted you, so I do most humbly apologize. You go ahead.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, Peter, and thank you for having me. And good morning to John, my colleague, and to Nana. Um, yeah, I was saying, making the point that my son is a student of history, and he always says to me, that slavery was a process, and it's something we always have to remember. And it was a process that worked so well that even after 1838 and even after what we call emancipation, a lot of the structures that were put in place continue to affect us way after 1838. So that there was a social dimension, an economic and a political dimension to slavery that took away a lot of the power that we had as African people. So that our ancestors, they left the plantation economically deprived with nothing. They walked away, some walked away with just a shirt and a pants, and some walked away with just a pants on their back, no shoes. So it meant that they had to start over from scratch economically. So it means that we as a people started at an economic disadvantage. Some walked away with families disrupted. So it means at the social level, we started at a disadvantage. You're not knowing where your son were, where your father was, where your brother was, where your grandmother was. So you started at a social disadvantage. And then, of course, we left without power. So we didn't have any political power. So there's not by chance that greater percent of black people find themselves in prison, find themselves in poverty, find themselves penniless, find themselves powerless. We started at a disadvantage. And these are the things that the fundamental, the deep fundamental things that we have to spend time unraveling. And it's not going to happen overnight. Because it was a process, then it also requires a process to unravel as well. And therefore, to get people to the point where we want them to get in terms of understanding all the dimensions of emancipation, it's going to take time. And we recognize that, some people it's going to be very difficult because, the psychology of slavery worked well. And therefore, to get them to move away from a lot of the things that are in them, it is going to take a long time to unravel that. And it may not even happen with some generations. We may have to skip 1 or 2 generations down the road to do the repair. The repair may not necessarily happen with this generation. That's a reality.
Yeah, but the foundation, of course, is being laid with this generation, which is very, very
definitely
important. So,
definitely.
Senator King, with the season of emancipation, what events do we have coming up? I think that there's one with the Freedom Park, which is slated again.
So yes, we're going into Golden Square, Freedom Park, this Saturday, May the 21st. This is our program to highlight the diversity. It's World Day of Diversity also is celebrated. It's a UN designated date that is also, and it falls within the season of emancipation. So we decided that we would use that date to also bring together all of the people, because this conversation about emancipation is not just an African thing, but people all over the world have to be part and parcel of this. And we thought that what we would do is we would use to highlight the diversification in Barbados, food. And food is one of those great unifiers that brings people together. And recipes, different approaches to cooking, all of these sort of things are going to be on display. And what we've been privileged, and I want to use that word privileged to be able to do, is to have a number of embassies in Barbados who are going to be participating. A number of associations of what we would call expats and stuff are also going to be there. We have the students of the Hospitality Institute. They are going to be there, and they're actually going to be using this as part of their examinations. So it's going to be lots of fun. And we want to invite everybody living in Barbados to come down to Golden Square. It starts at 11 in the morning and finishes at 6 p.m. So between there, you have food, you have craft, you have music, you have some performers like Mr. Dale, Keisha Christian, Kurt Brown. We have a gospel choir that is going to be there also having those what people refer to as the spirituals coming in. You have Wayne Cool on Wayne Cool is also going to be there. It's going to be live streamed, and there are going to be lots of interviews not only with the participants who will be showcasing their foods and sampling and selling, but also with those who come down there to be with us. So we're using this as a part also to get people who might have their own personal biases and all of these different things that we carry with us, this baggage, to come to Golden Square, a place where a lot of history was made, and celebrate with everyone, with different people of different ethnic backgrounds, sampling foods from different parts of the world. You know, we have members, the Muslim Women's Association, they're going to be there. We have from Argentina, Venezuela, China, Guyana, Dominica, Trinidad. I mean, it's just a potpourri, pardon the pun, of food and friendship. And that's what happens on this Saturday in Golden Square.
In Golden Square.
In Golden Square. Mm-hmm. On Wednesday, and these are the ones that are rounding out the month of May. On Wednesday, the 25th, I don't know, Pete, if you will remember years ago, we had a fantastic show that used to be at the Frank Cullinan Hall called the Roots Experience.
Yes.
Used to be put on by Mr. Lane.
Yes.
Well, his son, Adano, has taken it up, and with the Division of Culture, we're going to have not the pageant aspect of it, but the fashion show. And that's going to be on Wednesday in Golden Square also. And again, we're going to be inviting all persons living in Barbados. It's a family affair to come to both the food festival on Saturday and the fashion show on Wednesday. And these are all parts and parcel of bringing the Barbadian families together. And it's not just the families of African descent, but it's all families. Because as we celebrate as African people, we're going to have to take our place in the world, like I said before, as equals among everyone else. And there's that famous quote talked about us being friends of all and satellites of none. This is a perfect example of that.
Nana, I'm wondering, within the context of IDPAD and perhaps the Global African Congress itself, one of the parts of the mission statement for IDPAD, the UK, was talking about the compilation and the collection and analysis and so on of statistical data. And this was something I think that Senator King and I spoke about the first time when they were launching the season of Emancipation, as something that I was hoping that we would be doing here, not only during the season, but outside of it as well. But where are you all with that? Because that's all part of the knowledge base that we as a people really and truthfully need access to.
Yes, I think what it's good to recognize is that organizations, civil society, has been doing a lot of work for years on things. So, for example, we've had the unfortunate case of deaths in custody. So deaths at the hands of the British state. So whether it's in prisons, immigration detention, or mental health institutions, African people have been dying in numbers which are not in keeping with our percentage in the population. So you have friends and families, organizations who've been campaigning for years. So those figures are available. Then there's something like maternal deaths. It's very, but our mothers are more likely to die in childbirth than any other population in the UK. So these kind of statistics are coming out not only because of civil society, but because of professional organizations. So for example, we've got the Society of African Caribbean Midwives. They've been compiling some of this data. And then you've got family and friends, like I said, looking at deaths in custody. You've got all sorts of things. So it's an ongoing process. But for most of us, it's also about having the courage to challenge some of these things. And that is what IDPAD Coalition UK has been doing, in that we bring forward some of these things. For example, family and friends, the last Saturday of every October, they usually have an event where they march to Downing Street. And that is partly to make sure that nobody forgets the figures which are decimating lives, and that something is being done, or at least we're insisting that something should be done about these unfortunate statistics. But I love what Senator King said about us being friends of all and satellites of none. Because in all our struggles, we need allies, and we need allies from other communities. But that's not to forget that we as African people need to recognize our Africanness and this coming together. And one of the things that I think has actually engaged us a lot, and maybe has been a positive, is CARICOM and the African Union having a summit in September last year. Because that's also a recognition of the fact that as African people, we need to connect both at grassroots level, government level, at all levels, and work together to make that difference in our lives. But I love the idea of the food festival, where you're saying that humanity can come together. We can celebrate each other's uniqueness. We can taste each other's foods. We can do all these things. But we need to also celebrate our Africanness. And that doesn't mean we can't appreciate other communities as well. So in a sense, the statistics, we like to keep them in context of the bigger fight, in context of the struggle, and in the context of our rediscovering who we are in terms of recognition. Because if you notice, the decade has three pillars: recognition, justice, and development. We need to recognize who we are as a people. We need to recognize what has happened to us and recognize the fight that we have to still fight in the struggle. We need justice, so we need to insist on it. We can't brush it under the carpet. And then development, developing the new linkages, the new things, and the way forward. And we need to do that together.
And now the development stage or the justice phase in the decade. Sorry.
The decade, it's funny, the three have to work together. Because we have different stages and with different things. The three pillars, that's why they are pillars. They are at the same time. You have to have recognition, you have to have justice, and you have to have development. For example, like I said, the AU CARICOM Summit was a development that has been long coming. It is interesting that the AU, African Union, has had a sixth region for the diaspora for years. It hasn't gone where it should be. We've got Haiti as an observer in the African Union. But if we recognize that we are one people, then they should have membership status. Some of us are Pan-Africanists from that perspective. And actually, if you look at it, CARICOM and the AU working together, we are a force in the United Nations. It gives us clout when we work together. And therefore, we can support each other's, so that's development. But it's also about justice. When you think of reparations, it affected, the people who had to work unpaid and were brutalized were the people in the diaspora. But it also affected Africa. Mother Africa lost children. People lost family members who were taken away, decimated the continent. So the reparations story is a story of justice for all of us. And we need to work together to make sure that that justice is given to the African people.
Is one of the things that we're going to chat with Rodney about when we come back from the break, because I know that is part of his portfolio as advisor. And so we're going to take a look at that when we come back. Before the break, I said that I was going to be throwing the next question to Rodney Grant, who is the Program Advisor in the Office of Reparations and Economic Enfranchisement. Rodney, you heard what Nana Asante was saying, so I think that you may want to continue.
Well, yeah, I agree. One of the key things about reparations is the repair, and part of that repair is the justice. And actually, the repair is one of the actions within the CARICOM 10-point plan. And just like the process of emancipation is a big part of the plan is that public education, because the win and the journey for reparations, we need all people on board. We need all of Caribbean people. That is why systematically CARICOM has established several pillars in the fight for reparations. So you have the National Reparations Committees, then you have the CARICOM Reparation Committee. And so one feeds into the next, and each have a specific role to play. Because we recognize that, we can't do this thing individually. A fight for justice and the fight for repair for reparations is going to be a long-term plan, and it requires all people on board. And also, the step made by CARICOM to form formal relations with Africa last year in terms of the Africa CARICOM Summit is a not by chance thing either. So the point I'm making is in the same way that slavery was a process, and the point that I made earlier, to win the battle, we have to have a process as well. And it has to be a long-term process, well planned out, so that the strategy of Africa and Caribbean coming together to deal with the diaspora, and I agree with Nana, the effects of slavery is the diaspora that is feeling it wherever they are, whether it's in North America, in Europe, and here in the Caribbean. We are feeling the effects of slavery. So we, the people who have to fight for this reparatory justice. And therefore, we have to start from the bottom, the every man in the street, every household at the national level, then bring it to the Caribbean, at the Caribbean level, and then we have to take that fight into the global space. And we have to come with a plan. It just can't be a nilly-willy shouting in the streets. We have to know what it is we're fighting with. This is why CARICOM came up with a very structured 10-point plan, so that we know what we're going for in terms of debt forgiveness. It has to be an apology, fight for education. I know there's a list of things that go on. So I agree with her. It is going to be a long process. But I believe that the coming together of Africa and the Caribbean is so very important, because we have so many things to deal with. I mean, the whole issue of debt forgiveness. And I made the point that we started at a disadvantage. So the issues we're dealing now with education and climate change and all these things, and the prevailing debt that we have to deal with in the Caribbean, is a not by chance thing. Our region started at a disadvantage. So if you don't have an economy, you can't build out a society. I mean, you can't deal with the health, you can't deal with education, you can't deal with the social issues that you have to deal with if you don't have an economy. So we started at a disadvantage in the region, and the same people that took our monies and built their empires, we have to go back to them and try to get this money back to build up our own society. So the issue of debt is critical. It has to be frontal in part of the repair. But yeah, it is a process. But I wanted to skip backwards as well to something John said and something Nana also said, and it brings to mind a statement that I always reflect on that was said by Walter Rodney. He said, African peoples have an ancestral dignity that they must rediscover and keep alive. And when you think about it, all that our ancestors came with was knowledge. They didn't left Africa with a suitcase. They didn't left with possessions and a TV and a table and food and they left with nothing but the clothes on their back. So what did they have that was intrinsic to us and to ourselves? Like it was the knowledge in their heads. So when Walter Rodney said African peoples have an ancestral dignity that they must rediscover and keep alive, what is being played out on Saturday in terms of the food, that is the knowledge they brought. The culture that we display, that is the knowledge they brought. Our spirituality, that is the knowledge that they brought. And these are the things, they fought hard to retain these things in very harsh conditions that were slavery. So what is the best that we can do as their ancestors? It's a fight to keep these things alive, because they fought to keep them alive in worse conditions that we would now. We are not under the whip, we are not under the gun, we are not in chains. So the most we can do is to at least, try to keep some of these things alive in the food, in our culture, in our education, in our way of life, in our cultural practices, our health practices, So I think we owe it to our ancestors to keep Walter Rodney's words at the tip of our tongues, to keep this ancestral dignity alive. I think is one of the best things that we can do.
Which is why Nana was saying about the importance of us telling our own story. Nana, could you share that African proverb again?
Yes, the African proverb is that until the lion learns to tell the story of the hunt, the story will always glorify the hunter. And we are lions. We need to tell our stories because they are powerful beyond measure. Some of the things that, again, as you talk about ancestral dignity, I think Nkrumah got it from Blyden, this idea of African personality. We have something, that intrinsic, because had this happened to another nation, I think they'd have been gone. But you can see, whether you go to the Caribbean, you go to South America, you find Africans still standing. And what people forget is that on the African continent, they brought some measures. I mean, my dad talks about, they used to have white only in the Gold Coast. They used to do things to us on the African continent that people don't even remember. So the kind of, how would I say, the kind of oppression that they put on African people wherever they were, it is something that we have survived because we are survivors. And we need to celebrate that African spirit, that dignity. And it is interesting when you talk about food, that you can see foods that have traveled from the African continent to the Caribbean and that we recognize today. So when you have rice and peas, you see it in Ghana as wache, which is a rice and peas dish. And there are other things, and we need to celebrate that connection, that in spite of what they did to us, we have retained who we are as a people.
Thank you. That's wonderful. And John, in the 5 minutes or so that we have left in this discussion, I think that's a nice segue back into the actual season of emancipation and so on. It's a beautiful tie-in.
It really is, and I want to thank Nana and Rodney for the points that they made, because those are the exact things that I would have said myself. It is a testimony. Those persons who prepared the way for us to be where we are today, that longevity, that strength against all odds. And Rodney, you made a point, which is something that I think we need to drive home with persons. Institutions are asking us to repay debt as small, tiny nations after robbing us ourselves of our own humanity, of our own dignity, of the resources that we were forcibly made to do on the continent and also in the diaspora. And I find it amazing that within the Commonwealth, the largest block of persons making up that particular institution.
Oh dear.
Oh, we've lost him.
Yes, at that critical point. Rodney, you think you can pick up from what he was saying?
Okay.
Okay, he's back. He's
John
back. We lost you, John.
Okay, I was saying that one of the problems was the idea of us having to repay debt at the levels
Yes.
that you see small developing countries within the Caribbean having to deal with. It is interesting that everyone will hold out for their pound of flesh on that. But then when it comes to talking about reparations, we have, hands go up and everybody wants to be standoffish against it. And if you look at the Commonwealth, the largest bloc within that institution is African and Caribbean things put together. They make the largest bloc within it. And so these are the types of conversations that we have to have in terms of us being able to make the steps that Rodney was speaking about for next generations to pick up on and to carry further. But the season of emancipation, as I was saying earlier, is again that time of reflection, a time of renewal, a time of of reaching out not only to ourselves or the diaspora, but as Nana said, you also need allies because we don't live in the world by ourselves. But we need to
Yes.
do that when we reach out and when we think we need to do that as an African people with dignity, with pride, and again with love. Because one of the things that we have lost, and a lot of people feel very uncomfortable talking about it, we have lost the capacity to love. And it is a very serious
Yes.
thing. If you look at what is happening we can look from London to United States to wherever our people are, and you see the high instances of crime against ourselves, slaughter against ourselves. We know what other people do to us, but there's a conversation that also has to be had about how we treat and how we view ourselves. And I think that that is part of the reparations or the repairing of our own psyche that we,
Exactly.
this particular generation, has to start that conversation.
And the conversations will continue. And, I'm so happy that we had the opportunity to actually discuss this morning. It was highly stimulating and highly informative, and I look forward to sharing the space with you all, every other week here on the Link Up, taking a look at the season of emancipation and from all of its levels. And Nana, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your experience. And don't be a stranger. I will be inviting you here again because there's so
Thank you.
much to talk about. You're
Thank you
welcome.
so much.
Thank you, Senator King, Rodney Grant. Thank you so much for joining
Thank
us.
you.
And don't forget World Diversity Day, the event in
Saturday.
Freedom Park Saturday. Food people from all around the world, good fun, and just, a good line, having a good
Of course.
time. Thank you so much,
Yes.
everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Coming up next on the Link Up, we get an opportunity to chat with TESSA CHADERTON-SHAW. And TESSA has been trying to get in. As I said, we seem to be having a few difficulties today, so I'm certainly glad that she was able to make it, and we'll chat with her when we come back. Making connections today is our theme, and at the top of the show, I shared a story with a recent experience that I had at the beach where I met someone who was a fan of the show, and she wanted us to take a look at panic attacks, and we will be dealing with that with Dr. Joy Sue a little later on in the month. However, it brought the discussion of mental wellness to the forefront, especially during these COVID times. And I thought that it would be great to have an opportunity to chat with mental health advocate TESSA CHADERTON-SHAW. TESSA is an advocate. She's also a lecturer in substance abuse. Unfortunately, substance abuse being one of the offshoots of mental unwellness, or trying to look after your mental wellness. People seek other ways, perhaps chemical substances, and assisting with that, and that can also be a problem. But I wanted to get an opportunity to chat with Tessa. So Tessa, welcome to the Link Up. It's nice to have you in company this Thursday morning.
Thank you, Peter. My God, it has been an amazing morning trying to connect with you virtually.
Wow. I am so sorry. It has been such a challenge.
But let me say this. I feel calm, cool, and collected.
That's good.
How about that for starters?
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
So I got all the IT people around me, and I said, help me do this, because I need to do this for Peter.
Thank you so much. I know the time is short. I kind of, in the beginning of the show, went into what the whole idea of stress was about and so on. But what I didn't go into was the challenges that some people have, not from stress, but from their own makeup, their own body's makeup, something that they don't have any control over. And we talk about mental health, but it has so many different facets. So we've got a short amount of time and a little bit, but a lot to talk about. So the floor is yours. Well,
maybe this is the start of other segments, but yes. Just let me say that mental health is, even right now as I sit here before you, is my ability to focus on the subject matter, to be calm, to be collected, to zero in. I am engaged in some other matters, of a national nature, but it's my ability to focus on you, to focus on this program, to manage the multiple things that I have to do today. But it's not just about me. Certainly COVID-19 has thrown up a lot of issues for individuals, for families, for the society that we live in. I just heard Senator King talk about love, and that, as Black people, we have not been very loving to each other. In fact, we kill each other. Yes. But more now than ever, we need love, we need hugs, we need to touch. Touch is very therapeutic. But given COVID-19, we've had to socially distance.
Yes.
And step back.
Yes.
You see people who you recognize, and you detect
touch elbows.
Yeah, we gotta bump elbows and
elbows.
Thumbs up, and we can't hug the people that we're used to hugging, so that's hard, and it impacts our mental health and our ability to navigate our day, so yes. There's so much I could say about it, but we all need to aim for good mental wellness. Even the selection of my talk today with white and black and white, and that even colors impact our moods.
Yes.
It's so many things. Getting dressed up, putting on makeup, getting out there and showing the world that despite all the challenges, and there are many, we all have challenges. You know, we don't all wake up and feel, oh, it's a wonderful day. Yes, we miss your prayers and we give God thanks, but we are navigating a lot of things individually and collectively.
Quite.
But being able to stay afloat and to love oneself and to take care of oneself and to give love to others. It may not be directly, it could be indirectly, intangibly, but being able to express love and loving thoughts and loving feelings and to receive the same is very important.
What about we had a session on Link Up called Finding Your Happy, and one of the ways that I find mine is by going to the beach. But I know that there are others who like to jog, who like to ride bicycles at weird hours of the morning.
Or who like me like to hike in the darkness of the night.
This is it. I don't understand that. But anyway, find your own happy, you know.
But I could talk about that. I mean, it's very real. I am a hiker. We cannot assemble as we used to, but hiking, not only is it great exercise, but it allows me to, my uncle, the late Frank Hassel, you always used to say this. When you are hiking, you have to look where you're stepping and avoid falling, and you don't have time to think about the problems in your life. And it's so true. And actually, when I'm hiking, and there are some beautiful areas in Barbados that are beyond description. Like being on those craggy hills on the East Coast opposite Barclays Park. If you can get up there, you will see Pico Tenerife to the north and the lighthouse in Simfila to the south. And it is an amazing panoramic view.
Right.
So hiking transports me to my happy place. Yes, there are risks involved, but once you wear the right gear, once you are hydrated, once you are with people who know where you're going, because you certainly don't want to get lost, I find my happy place there, and I have great clarity of thought, and sometimes things that are problematic for me are suddenly solved, or I can find a way to navigate it. So, you know, a happy place for another person would be getting their nails done, getting a pedicure, having a massage. You know, it's going to vary from individual to individual.
But it is important that you do it, that you find that happy, because it buffers all of the other stresses and so on which one has in life.
Most definitely. You know, on the flip side of that, we have a range of mental health issues that can start with prolonged sadness, depression, anxiety, panic attacks. You know, some of those can be controlled by medication. For example, I spoke to someone last night, and it applies to me too. I have not traveled since 2019, and I really have no interest in traveling right now unless it's absolutely necessary. But I can fly in other ways. I can, you know, going on, as I said, using the East Coast, for example, and being in an elevated space, I can soar as well and imagine and dream. You talked about the sea, Peta, and there's something I did in 2020 with my cousin, who took me entirely around Barbados on a boat,
Nice.
a sailing boat. And that for me, when I returned to Paynes Bay, I said, you know what, Tessa? I don't need to go anywhere else.
Wow.
I was that fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
We started from the careenage on Saturday. It was a Saturday, it was a full moon. It was a night that would have been a full moon. We left the careenage at 2 in the afternoon. We sailed north and we went 24 nautical miles north of North Point.
Wow.
And looped back around. I saw the sunset. I saw the moonrise. I saw the sunrise the next morning. And we returned to Paynes Bay at 9 o'clock the next morning.
Wow.
And I was transported to an extremely happy place by my cousin, who is a captain. His name is Garrett Shaper. And that for me, to go around my island, this rock, was precious.
And it's a place
And
you can return to in your mind, in your memory, again and again.
Yeah. I would never forget the feeling of disembarking and just submersing myself in the water in Paynes Bay. It was so sensual. It was spiritual. It was heavenly.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, gosh, I did this, you know, and I knew that he was highly qualified. He had an excellent crew, but it was amazing. It was an amazing experience.
Okay,
And,
so sorry, not to cross you, but you find your happy place, and it's almost sensory, tactile. I'm picking that up from your words, your use of words.
Yes.
There's also an element of danger in there somewhere in your happy place, because the hiking in the dark and the possibility of tripping and so on, and then in the boat in the middle of the night.
But I come from a family of
sailors. Yeah, I know.
Seafarers.
I know.
So
I know.
when I saw the moon at its zenith on that night around 4 o'clock in the morning, I wasn't thinking about any danger. I was just thinking about what a beautiful world God has created.
No, I'm only teasing.
And the moon, you know, but yes, I am very tactile.
Yes.
I like to hug. I like to connect. I like to hug. I'm a hugger.
Mm-hmm.
My mother knows this only too well. My father, if I went to his house 4 times a day, I had to kiss or hug him each time. That's just the way we are.
So what advice do you give to people who are like that, but now because of the pandemic and the world that we're in, who are unable to be that kind of social animal anymore? What kind of advice? Because they're going to be feeling that withdrawal of you know, the touch, the hug, the kiss on the cheek, that sort of connection.
Well, you know, every family is different. Family dynamics differ. You know, someone will find great pleasure reading voraciously as opposed to wanting to be touched. And there are some people who don't want to be touched for various reasons. They may have been abused. They may have experienced some sort of trauma. It's going to vary from individual to individual. I think human beings are naturally social animals. Mm-hmm. Some have a higher need for affiliation than others. There are times when I am very happy with lots of people, but there are also times when I'm very happy in my own space, right? So, and there are times when you do need to withdraw and reflect, regroup, do some self-introspection. But I can't sit here and just let me say I'm neither psychiatrist nor psychologist.
Yes, I know.
I know what I've experienced. I am a caregiver and of a child that does have mental health challenges. And there is no one size fits all prescription. So I have, as I said, I miss my hiking buddies. I miss that camaraderie and that the challenge of each of us pushing each other to climb up the back of climb up White Hill or climb up Port House Hill. You would be amazing. The people who think that they can't do it, but they can. They can.
Wow.
Of course, individuals' level of fitness also matter, hydrating and all of that. But I've seen phenomenal transformation. I've seen great friendships being forged. So, I guess it has a lot to do with stepping out of one's comfort zone.
Exactly.
I find it boring to say, walk around the garrison. That is not a challenge for me.
Right.
So.
Thank you. I've got 30 seconds left, so I thank you. So
I want to end with this, Peta, if I may. I think I shared a video with you about brokenness, and there is this guy who gives a lot of advice about self-care, and he actually in his video speaks about the beauty in brokenness. And
I wish I could share it, but we don't have the copyright on it. But I'll see what I can do.
But it's on YouTube.
Yeah, I can send it, but we would most probably be taken off of YouTube and Facebook because of showing things like So we have to find our own happy, but I have to go. I've got 10 seconds left. Yes.
All right. So there's one thing that he says that resonates with me, and it is this: every next level of your life demands a new you.
Yes. Thank you. I'm going to pick up on that the next time. Thank you.
Peta, I would love to join you again. I'm sorry I couldn't do it earlier, but we made it
done. Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
And this is the start.
Yes.
Okay, love you.
Love you too. You take care and you stay safe.
Okay,
and thank you so much for joining us today on The Link Up. Coming up next is Newsday. You stay safe, stay well. See you next Thursday.